Today is a great, wonderful, amazing, incredible day, and I'll tell you why. Because it's a Sweden day. The incredible story of Sweden's Vasa warship. Without further ado, let's get into this reaction. Let's go. Wow. Look at the size of that ship. Look at the detail on that ship. Wow.
I'm Joshua Hamlin in Stockholm, Sweden, and behind me is the Vasa Ship Museum. Now, to understand the story and the history behind this fascinating ship, you have to understand the context of what was going on in Europe at the time. So this was built during the 30 Years' War, which were the famous religious wars that took place in the first half of the 17th century in Europe, famous for being wars between the Catholics and the Protestants. Now, Sweden was Protestant, and so the Swedish king, Gustavus II Adolphus, was trying to expand the Swedish Empire while at the same time fighting the Catholics, particularly the Polish. And so as he was doing that, he was looking to greatly expand his army and his navy, which is where the Vasa came in. The Vasa was one of 4 ships commissioned. It had a sister ship that was the same size as it, and then there were 2 other smaller ships that were commissioned at the same time, so 4 in total. The Swedish king's goal with the Vasa was to make a clear statement.
The way that it's carved out is amazing. Like the architecture. I mean, I know for a fact the people that built it weren't I know they weren't treated well, but it's amazing to see and have a look at, you know, what humans were able to do in terms of carpentry and building. And wow.
Statement about the power of the Swedish military. So it's full of symbols throughout the ship. It's basically a floating piece of propaganda is what it was at the time, because there's tons of symbols and artwork that represent the power of Sweden over its enemies, again, particularly over Poland. So there's a hiding Polish aristocrat nearby the large lion on the front, which the king was known as the Lion of the North in Sweden, and so that was kind of his symbol, and he had kind of the Polish aristocrat cowering in the background as a sign of force from Sweden. There's also a lot of imagery to do with Rome, where the king compared himself to the Roman Emperor Augustus, and many Roman emperors are placed throughout the ship to show kind of that almost a lineage trying to go back, saying, hey, Sweden is kind of the modern Roman Empire, and so that's kind of where they get their legitimacy from. Also a way of combating some of the German states and empires who were supposed to be kind of the modern Roman Empire at the time as well, and so that was a way to combat that. By doing this, another part of the symbols and all of that was the great painting and how bright everything was. There was lots of gold throughout it. The lions and things were painted with gold, and then some very bright paint throughout the ship, just so that people could see this coming from afar and really see what a symbol this was.
So this used to be painted gold, but over time that gold has obviously eroded. Or come off or whatever, or maybe even stolen. I don't know. Where's the gold gone? Does gold disappear? I thought gold's meant to be like a strong precious metal. Does gold erode? I don't really know. Why is there no gold in there now? Someone answer that question.
Was of Swedish power at the time. Directly behind me here is a 1:10 scale model of the Vasa, and this ship was built from 1985 to 1990, but the colors weren't added until 2008 because it took them 12 years of researching all of the different pigments and styles of color that were used on the real ship, the Vasa itself, before they could color in the model to get it as accurate as possible here.
So they colored in the model to show what it would have looked like, but they've left the actual original ship as it is now. Cool. Interesting.
So the colors are amazing on the model here, and it really gives you an idea of just how beautiful this ship would have been when it was built and when it briefly floated here in Stockholm Harbor. Probably the reason the Vasa is as famous as it is today, and the reason it's been able to be so well preserved, is because of what happened shortly after it launched on August 10th, 1628. It had 64 cannons on it at this point and was all decked out in all of its glory and bright paint, ready to set sail on its maiden voyage. So it was launched into Stockholm Harbor, sailed for about 20 minutes. As it passed the palace, it let out a salute with its cannons, and the gun ports were open in all of its glory. And then about 20 minutes in, a gust of wind hit, and it then sunk. and one of the major problems with it
That's not good.
was that since they had done that salute with the cannons, they had left the lowest level of gun ports open, so when the wind hit, it tipped the ship, and water poured into that lowest part of gun ports, and it began to sink, and it took only 5 minutes for it to sink to the bottom of Stockholm Harbor. So
5 minutes? Like, people on the ship would have to jump off the ship real quick.
basically
Oh my God.
about 25 minutes from when it set sail to when it was on the bottom of the harbor, and this was the glory of the Swedish fleet, and it went down that quickly. So really a tragic event. The numbers for how many died aren't exactly clear. It's about approximately 30 to 40 is what most people think. Women and children on there as well, because it was customary for the families of some of the sailors and the officers to join them on the maiden voyage, and then they would have gotten off at one of the islands outside of Stockholm later in the voyage if it had been successful. And so some women and younger children sank with the ship as well. Now we're going to take a look inside a model of the top gun deck they have here in the Vasa Museum, and as you can see, as I walk underneath here, there was not a lot of headspace at all for the sailors here on these gun decks, and then obviously the main...
But back then were people shorter? But then again, Scandinavians, you guys have the... It might be a myth, but is it a myth that you guys are tall? I'm not really coming... I mean, I will find out when I go to Sweden, but I always thought that a lot of Scandinavian people are tall. A lot of men especially are tall. Let me know if you're a male, can't speak. If you're a male Swedish guy, let me know in the comment section what height you are, just out of curiosity.
Main reason that we have these decks is for the cannons, and so you can see the cannons on display here. They've got several that they've recreated to show what it would have looked like on the top gun deck of the Vasa. Behind me here you see how many of the Vasa's cannons were salvaged a few decades after it sank, still in the 17th century. They would send down divers standing on an iron plate here in this bell, and when the bell was lowered into the water, a natural air pocket would form. You can see some illustrations here, and so the diver was still able to breathe. He would hold on to an iron hook, which he then attached to a cannon along with ropes, and using that they were able to pull up many of these cannons. So using this way, they were able to salvage all but 3 of the Vasa's cannons in the 17th century. So when it was eventually pulled up in the 20th century, only 3 of the cannons were still on the ship. The Vasa sat on the bottom of Stockholm Harbor for 333 years until salvage began in 1961. Now this was a long process that took place over several decades until the 1990s when the museum was actually built that now houses the Vasa. Over that time period they had to constantly keep the wood of the ship soaked so that it would not dry out and rot, and so they were always keeping it soaked down for quite a number of years as they preserved it and tried to salvage as much as they could, and found skeletons. They found about 20 skeletons around the ship and in the ship when they pulled it up, and then all sorts of other objects that really give great insight into the kind of life and times of the people in the...
That's a bit gross. You know, when you see skeletons, you're like, oh, it's a skeleton. And then you realise that actually was a person. An actual person like me and you that lived and had feelings and hopes and aspirations and kids, maybe. Yeah, kind of strange. It's weird. Don't you think it's weird how teeth are preserved? When I think about my teeth, I'm like, unless I get cremated when I die, my teeth will probably like outlast me. Ugh.
In the 17th century here in Stockholm and in Sweden. After the sinking, an inquiry was opened, and they looked into why the ship sank and trying to figure out, is there someone in particular to blame here? The shipwright actually died with the ship, and so obviously he was one of the people that would have been towards the top of that list, but he was dead, so they couldn't really do anything about that. In the end, no one was actually convicted or anything. There was no particular blame put on one group of people or one person, though a lot of the blame was sort of pointed towards the king because he had pushed those builders so much to try to get the ship done, and a lot of people kind of thought he was at fault, but obviously a powerful king at the time, you can't convict him of this, and so in the end no one was actually convicted and the inquiry moved on. Today,
Can I just say, it's kind of incredible that they were able to salvage the ship in the 19... It got... You took it from the bottom of the ocean and it was still in one piece and preserved it. And that's incredible.
The Vasa is 98% original, and work is still being done on the ship right now. They're replacing a lot of the bolts with stainless steel bolts just to help preserve the ship for as long as possible. So I'd encourage you to definitely check this out if you're in Stockholm or visiting Sweden. The museum is well worth a visit. They've laid it out really nicely. There's several floors of exhibits. They give really good context around the building of the ship, the sinking of it, the people that were on it, all sorts of really good information, and have a lot of cool stuff to see in the museum. So I definitely encourage you to check it out. It costs 130 Swedish crowns for an adult and 110 for a student. So that gives you some idea of the price there. And there's some excellent tours in English as well as several other languages that take place throughout the day that are well worth going on. They're about 25-minute long tours. They give a lot of good information. There's also a good video that's about 17 minutes long that kind of introduces the whole thing as well when you come in. That's well worth watching. So definitely make sure to hit up both of those things when you visit the museum.
I'm definitely going to this museum. That sounds like so much fun. The Sweden Vasa warship that was in the bottom of the ocean, and they preserved it and turned it into a museum. Awesome. I wonder how many ships are at the bottom of the ocean right now that we don't know of, and will probably be I'm going to say unearthed, but that's the wrong word, unseed in the future. That's crazy. And that little but I still can't get over the skeleton with the teeth. Why do teeth survive for so long? Why? Someone let me know. I don't understand. Very strange. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Until the next one, I will see you very soon.